Hello, Caroline. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Hi, Rick.
Hey,
Can
Jimmy.
can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Hi, Peter. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Okay, we're all good. Okay, all right. I'll leave that to you, Caroline. You will chair the session. Okay.
Outstanding. Thank you. So, hello, everyone. We are now in session two, and it is a brilliant day. Our guiding theme for session two is what was learned last year, three reflections in a paper. And our colleagues include um, Richard Pelt Steele, University of Massachusetts in USA, who is also, may I add, the inaugural chair of the Niagara Conference on Workplace Mobbing. We have Yves Seguin, University of Quebec at Montreal in Canada. We have Peter Wiley, University of British Columbia. Okay, again, please, I apologize, Peter, from Canada. And then these are our colleagues who will be bringing forward reflections. And we also have a colleague, Kenneth Westhues, University of Waterloo, Canada, who will be bringing forward a paper that he's written, The Moment of Truth of Work in Workplace Mobbing. Each of our colleagues have a deep engagement in the birth of the conference, along with Dr. Meng, and an active engagement in the study of this phenomenon, as well as seminal works in this area, as we've already heard earlier today. So Rick, Eve, and Peter will each bring forward about 5 minutes of reflections from last year and how things have moved forward, as well as we are going to offer Ken about 30 to 35 minutes presentation on his paper. So I'm supposed to be chairing this session, so my apologies. I'm a little OCD. And if I happen to cut in towards the end of your reflections, I apologize in advance. Rick, would you like to begin?
You bet. I'll try. I'll try to stay on time and not put you in that position, Caroline. So, I'm sorry I can't be with you this year. It's so exciting to see you all in that room. In my defense, I'm recently returned from a friend's wedding in Madagascar, and it was spectacular. But it was exhausting both physically and financially getting there. So I'm grateful to our organizers at Niagara, especially, of course, Ching Li Meng for making remote participation possible. In this reflection, I want to mention some highlights for me of last year's conference. But first, a quick disclaimer then that I'll name some names. By doing so, I don't mean to exclude any other fantastic presentations, and I'll explain why I cite the examples I do. Last year's inaugural conference marked a groundbreaking gathering of workplace mobbing scholars that demonstrated the breadth of the field that we're trying to carve out here. One presentation that really stuck with me as representative of our disciplinary diversity was Emily Godby's. And I hope she doesn't mind me putting her on the spot, but I remember Emily telling me at dinner how she was faced with the usual and tragic circumstances of a mobbing. And her remarkably constructive reaction to that was to take her own expertise in art history and focus that lens on mobbing. And in that vein, she helped us in the conference to see the deep roots of mobbing behavior in human culture. And Emily's here again. I can't wait to hear her speak. We also started last year's conference with welcome messages, as Ching Li mentioned, from around the globe. And I was moved especially by that from Florencia Peña, which Ching Li mentioned in Mexico. Um, Florencia, we heard from her. We heard this morning from her co-author, Brian Martin, who came from Australia, her collaborator. Florencia already had been organizing mobbing scholars in Central and South America. And as Ching Li said, she joins us again this year to share substantive findings. And then for me, the most deeply affecting presentation last year was that of Kim Lewis, who joined us with her Richardson. And as many of you know, Kim's son Joel was killed in circumstances precipitated by his victimization in an academic workplace mobbing. And I knew a cold outline of the facts in Joel's story, but last summer to meet and hear Kim, I felt like as best as one could, I got to know Joel as a human being and not just a case study. Kim is a crusader against mobbing for reasons that no one should have to be. But in her willingness to do that, she and Joel are both contributing profoundly to our work. And sadly, but essentially, I expect we will hear this week more stories involving pain and suffering. These are just examples of my memories from last year's conference. As I said, I met so many amazing people, brilliant scholars, made new friends, heard researches and recountings that had me on the edge of my seat there in Niagara, time and again over 2 emotional days. I've chosen these examples because they highlight for me the universality of mobbing and the imperative that we as a body define this study as its own cross-discipline. When I think of our collective work on mobbing, I think of the parable of the blind man and the elephant. When we all worked in disciplinary or professional silos, sociology, criminology, human relations, even as many of us experienced or witnessed mobbing behavior in these discrete venues, we endeavored to approach the problem with the knowledge and the tools we had available. So for Ken, sociology, for Maurizio Reyes and me, it was to file lawsuits. Caroline and Linda Shawcross saw problems in education leadership. For Karen Leonard, who spoke last year, it was nursing. For Father Mayer, we just heard it was child labor. And for Emily, it was art. We each made strides, but mobbing is the elephant. And just as Brian told us that mobbing does not respect occupational differences, its study does not respect disciplinary boundaries. And only together are we going to be able to see and understand the whole of the animal. Likewise, mobbing does not respect cultural differences or political borders. It's a dysfunction of the human social condition. It might occur and play out differently in different cultural and political contexts, but its essence is the same, whether it's the Americas, Europe, Africa, or Australia. And once again, we will not succeed in defining and understanding it, nor in developing mechanisms to redress it, unless we work together across cultures and geographies. So this is the important work that we began in Niagara 1 year ago. This is the vital work of this conference. This work is generational in scope. We won't finish today or tomorrow, but the best way to get something done is to begin. Our association, journal, and conference are a beginning, and I thank you all for being part of it.
Thank you, Rick. Eve, would you like to be our next person to reflect upon last year's experience and your thoughts around how we're moving into this year?
Yes, thank you. This will be a very personal account of what I have learned last year. Although I'm an atheist, I'll probably sound like a born-again Christian, and although I praise myself on being disillusioned and cynical, I'll probably look very naive, but so be it. What struck me last year is the moment we got together in the conference room the first morning, a very special dynamic spontaneously took place. And I think that somehow we were all aware of it. Equally striking, this ambience prevailed until after the dinner on the last evening. And for me, it lasted until Anne Westhues drove me to the bus station the next day. Now, in describing this unexpected experience, I want to avoid the cliches of management discourse, such as, we were like a big family. People were certainly nice to one another, but this was completely different from the behavior you encounter in university departments. In that type of work settings, officially people get along and collaborate, but kindness is fake. It's born out of self-interest or even fear. And of course, people don't hesitate to stab each other in the back at the earliest opportunity. But last year, things were completely different. You might say people were nice, but that doesn't capture the fact that they seemed genuinely devoid of ulterior motives and judgmental attitudes. Now, making a nod to Kate, I don't know where Kate is. making a nod to Kate, who's speaking on session 4, I'd be very curious to know what a social psychologist might have said about this very peculiar atmosphere. The key features, are you Kate? Hi, Kate. The, the key features of it were openness, acceptance, fun, spontaneous understanding, positive communication, and transparency. Let me give you an example of that transparency. On day 2, Anne-Marie Flynn and I were sitting together in the conference room. All of a sudden, Bert Richardson, an opinionated and absolutely endearing old gentleman, came and sat right behind us. And he started to flirt with me, complimenting my looks, telling me what a wonderful woman I was. He even invited me to go on a cruise with him. And at some point, he declared, "You see, Eve, I'm being upfront, so you won't be able to accuse me of sexual harassment." Of course, Anne-Marie was laughing her head off. On my return to Montreal, I emailed Chingli and the others, Ken, Rick. I emailed them this message, it's part of it. What a gathering it was, the best event I've attended in years, and the nicest people I've met in years, both in my professional and personal life. So I'd like to conclude my reflection with a question that points to what I may have learned from last year. Could it be said that individuals who have been impacted by mobbing, as targets or otherwise, become better people? This is it.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Eve. That's a wonderful question to leave us to consider in our reflections. Peter, that's going to
Yes.
be difficult to follow up.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Jingli, Ken, Rick, Caroline, for providing me this opportunity to present my reflections on last year's conference, which I was honored to attend and present at. So what do I think we learned from last year, other than we have to thank Jingli, Ken, and Rick so much for making it happen? My reflection is I believe that the conference, as well as the establishment of the Research Association and Journal, has guided us much closer to the goal of making workplace mobbing a legitimate and fruitful scholarly research investigation of an identifiable social phenomenon, mobbing, being especially prevalent in workplaces relative to other social environments. I also believe the conference moved us much closer to establishing research into workplace mobbing and as an objective, evidence-based social scientific field of cause and effect. The pioneering work of Ken Westhues has already done much to further this, and we are not quite there yet. But the research presented at the conference from diverse and multidisciplinary scholars has helped us to understand the phenomena more fully and scientifically, and Chingli's efforts are setting the clear direction in that. The conference made clear that the goal is not just to establish social science research into the phenomena, but of course guiding society towards litigating workplace mobbing in the civil courts, or perhaps even prosecuting it as a criminal offense, or at the very least lessening it. Did we learn that workplace mobbing needs its own conference, journal, and perhaps research institute? Yes, I think we did. Last year's conference was fascinating in bringing together scholars from diverse disciplines with different lenses with which to view workplace mobbing in its various guises. I think the conference showed us that workplace mobbing needs a single focused conference and journal, not only to establish the field more solidly and establish a connected and interactive community of workplace mobbing scholars, experts, and lawyers, but also to support the Research Association and the journal. What else did we learn? We learned of the real human tragedies and tolls of workplace mobbing. Many of the scholars presented last year had personal experiences with workplace mobbing, Tragically, some were no longer alive to be present. These stories serve to increase our resolve to understand, ameliorate, and potentially contribute to research that might lead to the future litigation and prosecution of workplace mobbing. I also reflect on how much has changed from last year's conference to this. Last year, the mood was liberal. Diversity, equity, inclusion were fine to talk about, and scholars felt secure to express their views. President Biden had just stepped away, and Kamala Harris was promising a bright, democratic, and inclusive future. This year's the mood is so different that the Canadian Association of University Teachers is currently advising Canadian scholars not to travel to conferences in the US unless necessary and essential. We've learned that our academic freedom and freedoms of expression are precarious. As we learned at last year's conference, workplace mobbing is often targeted at those who question and challenge authority and administration, and who hold deemed politically incorrect opinions, or members of racial and other minorities. This is only going to increase in today's more authoritarian, non-inclusive, and left versus right, politically polarized atmosphere in the US, both within and across occupations and institutions. We also learned last year that at the conference that workplace mobbing is a result of a collective social process in which we ourselves may be participating, which we should be wary of. But with that proviso in mind, last year, Santa Ono, the president of my workplace at the time of my own workplace mobbing, the University of British Columbia, was an active participant in my mobbing and was espousing the virtues of DEI at president of the University of Michigan. This year, Santa Ono was changing his political color to curry the favor of the University of Florida by trying to distance himself from DEI in pursuit of a $3 million salary. My heart was warmed when karma and hubris caught up with Santa Ono and he was rejected for the Florida job. He allowed workplace mobbing to flourish at UBC in his years as president there, and I think his case is evidence of the lack of principle that pervades many higher education institutions in North America today, probably elsewhere, leading to increased workplace mobbing. So I think the need for the Research Association, conference, journal, and hopefully Research Institute is going to massively increase. I believe we're on the right side of history. Thank you for this opportunity to express my thoughts and for your attention. And my apologies for the lengthy aside on Santa Ono, and for me joining those from both sides, left and right, currently ganging up on him and attacking him or mobbing him in question marks. But I couldn't resist. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Actually, I was wondering why he was turned down from that position. So I actually appreciate the fact that you shared.
Yeah. Yes. He was questioned on his honesty in saying that he no longer believes in DEI. And it's both the left and the right who finds him disagreeable right now.
People are interesting, but
Yes.
honestly, thank you for the reflections from our colleagues. Ken, would you like to bring your paper forward? I'm not sure our microphone is on, so people online can hear.
How do I turn?
Oh, brilliant. You just did.
Now is it on?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Caroline, I don't need more than half an hour. And so we could have 10 minutes for some feedback from the audience on these three really interesting reflections that Rick and Eve and Peter have given us before I talk. Would that make sense, Caroline?
That's perfect. No doubt. I'm sure everyone is percolating and wanting to bring forward questions and comments. That's outstanding.
Like this lady social psychologist who would make sense of what the hell happened last year, right? Who knows, the mood might be different this year.
Yeah, if anyone want to, so we have a microphone here.
Mhm.
Hi, good morning. My name is Christina, and I'm coming from Renison University College, affiliated with the University of Waterloo. I'm struck, Peter, by your comment related to the person who targeted you by saying you are now questioning whether by evoking the target, that are you now engaging in mobbing, the question mark. And so really the question, and perhaps this is something for discussion as we engage in the conference over the next 2 days, is part of a reaction to the being targeted. Is that also like at what point do we say that that's part of the narrative and that's part of the story? And is that mobbing? Is it not mobbing? Is it defense? Is it how do we characterize that? So that's just a reflection based on what you were sharing, Peter, and I thank you for your testimony.
Yeah, shall I respond? Or?
Whatever you're comfortable with. That was a strong point to bring forward.
Yeah, I think Janice Harper paper last year sort of said that we're all prone to this mobbing. And yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily call it mobbing if people are criticizing a leader for a certain decision. I think it's a long-term process. But I think we're all human, and I think it's a basic human condition to join in on groups, and to, I think Ken has pointed that out, that we have to be wary of that.
May I jump in too, Caroline? If I thank you for raising that question. In my first draft of what I'd say today, that was way too long for the time limit. I actually raised this very question as one of the most compelling ones for me to come out of last year's conference. And that was this idea about sort of like what I would call, is there such a thing as like white hat mobbing? Like the use of mobbing tools in a constructive way. I think that there is not. I think Ken and I had a discussion about that last year, and I think it's a question of defining mobbing correctly, so as to exclude that. But regardless, I think it's really important to recognize that one of the reasons our work here is so important is in drawing these parameters, drawing these definitions around of mobbing. We've got to realize that some of the same, like the reasons that mobbing is so prevalent, for example, in the academic community, and Ken can speak to this better than I can, but those reasons overlap with good things about academics, like faculty governance and academic freedom. Kind of the same preconditions that create that unique environment also facilitate mobbing. And so it ends up being really hard to draw this fine line between what is sort of socially acceptable in terms of, as Peter said, calling out power, holding leaders accountable, and so on, and mobbing behavior, which is loathsome. And that you would think that that's obvious, and often it is not. And that's that's part of our job, is to figure that out.
Are there additional thoughts coming forward from our colleagues?
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm Leah Hollis. I'm from Penn State University, and I have a comment about the mobbing remark. A lot of my work on workplace bullying, I tie it to civil rights activism. So a number of my studies have talked about what I'll call collective action. If you have somebody who has power over you, one person cannot resist or fight back. So when you have a collective action, 2 or 3 people, whether it's a union, whether it's something like that, I almost see that collective voice as a way of equaling the balance of power instead of looking at it as reverse mobbing. Because you wouldn't need all those other voices if you had the same power as the person bullying you. I just offer that for something to consider.
And if I may say, and on the apropos of reflections on last year, another of my many favorites from last year, and forgive me, the author's escaping me now, but someone spoke about unions and mobbing. Maybe one of you can recall who, but and it was at once true that unions could effect mobbing because of their power structures and goals. and also true that they would be a vital tool in combating mobbing. And and therein is the problem, that collective voice is critical. Collective action is critical to advance legitimate aims such as civil rights. And yet it also creates kind of the same groundwork from which a mobbing action can arise.
I do want to ensure that we have plenty of time for Ken's paper. Eve, would you like to bring forward any thoughts around the discussion that's been occurring, or are you comfortable reflecting on this right now?
Well, I can say something, but there's a lady over there who wants to speak, so
Oh,
perhaps she could go first.
thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Newlands, and I'm a school superintendent in Waterloo Region. I had a comment and a question. So my comment is around mobbing. When you see it play out again, I think there's some research that would suggest that there is a trickle-down effect, that what you experience, then you then apply in another context. So I think there would be some support to suggest that it does replicate itself in certain environments. And then I actually have a question for Eve, which is around the idea of mobbing making you better. So I think you're speaking to resiliency, and I wonder if there is research that you've come across to indicate in what ways you might become better. Do you work harder as a result of being mobbed, or do you develop psychological resources or social resources?
This is a very difficult question. I mean, I would have to think about it to answer you. First, I'd like to say that resilience is not equivalent to becoming better. Resilience means that you survive the mobbing or whatever aggression. Becoming better means being able to communicate differently. I mean, what happened last year? I don't know if Ken or other people noticed that. I'm sure we all did. No one spoke about it, but I think it was completely unusual. I mean, the dynamics was completely unusual. Martin, you noticed it, I'm sure. I mean, there was a kind of, fluid, going between people, and I had never experienced anything like that. Now, my explanation is probably because all those people were better people. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not sure. I would have to think about that. I'm sorry. But I mean, I wish you'd witnessed that. It was, I mean, Ken, perhaps you could speak about that. I'm sure you've noticed that as well. I mean, it was quite incredible. I mean, I was, over the moon when I went back to Montreal. I couldn't believe what I had experienced. That's why I said I'm probably sounding like a born-again Christian.
There's actually a great follow-up question to this that's specifically focused upon you, Eve, from Maritza Reyes. Eve considered whether mobbing could get targets to become better people. Perhaps part of this consideration is that targets of mobbing are already good people and even the best people in their toxic work environments. And taking a constructive approach to responding to mobbing does help to heal and become even better people. That was very similar to the question that was just posed, but it was specifically focused upon you, Eve.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Sure. The comment offered was Eve considered whether mobbing could get targets to become better people. Perhaps part of this consideration is that targets of mobbing are already good people and even the best people in their toxic work environments. Fair statement. And taking a constructive approach to responding to mobbing. Does this help to heal and become even better people?
Well, I'm sorry, Caroline, I would have to disagree with you on that. I think that anybody can be a mobbing target. I think that very good people can become mobbing targets, and I think that bastards can become mobbing targets. Journalists who interview me always ask me, yeah, but I mean, don't you think that, those targets, they're difficult people? I mean, we can understand why people react that way and try to get rid of them. And well, suggesting they're not nice people. And I think they're wrong. I mean, you can be nice, you can be a bastard and still be a target. So, and I think that scientific research has been unable, and Chingli, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that scientific research has been unable to identify common features of targets. I mean, we don't know why some people become targets. I mean, Ken would say because they speak too much, but I mean, this is a behavior. It's not a characteristic of someone.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. So that's the reason why we have this conference. It's about like a scientific research. As what I just said in the opening remark, it's not about the consequence. It's not about the motivation. It's about the behavior, the observable behavior. And that's what we need to do. So I always, that's my argument. So don't question them. Don't ask why. Don't ask that. It could be any reason. Are you a good person, bad person? How to define good person? What is the conceptualization of a good person? It's all about the perspectives. I'm a good person. I could be a horrible person. It depends on to whom. So that's not our field. That's not what our research focuses on. What we focus on is, like what Father Mar just said, how to prevent this. That's what, as the mobbing, scientific research on mobbing, that's what our focus should be. It could be anyone. So we are not a judge. We're scientists. Yeah. Like what said, I could not remember said, oh, last year, Eve said, yeah, we're nice people. There were people, last year we had a mobbing target. They are normal people, but when you look at the document that like describe them, it seems like they are describing a different person. Monster. Or like what in Kenneth's book, Peter. Pain in the ass. Yeah. So we're not judged. So who is pain in the ass? You, me, it doesn't matter. That's not what our focus on. Our focus is the scientific research. We need to be specific, like a conceptualization of mobbing behavior. So this can put a foundational work for the future legislation. Ken, I think we should give this to you.
Jane Lee, that was outstanding and actually a brilliant transition to Ken's paper, which is The Moment of Truth in Workplace Mobbing. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Both those who are here and those who are tuned in virtually. I'm not going to read a paper. That can be deadly sometimes. So what I'll try to do is to just kind of summarize the paper. Actually, my paper is not quite finished, but I'll summarize the gist of the argument. And I have some PowerPoint slides here to go with that, but I don't know what to click on.
We got yours on the desktop. Right here. Is this you? Moment of Truth.
Yeah, that's it. Peter, goodbye. You just got covered up by first slide here.
That's okay.
And so how do I advance this?
You can either use this.
Just use that to advance. Okay.
arrow keys right here.
Okay, so I can go like this. There we go.
Mhm.
Okay. So what I want to, I really appreciated the reflections from Eve and Rick and Peter. Ideally, what we're doing here is cumulative, that we're building a science. And I get a sense that in some respects, we're in a stumbly sort of way, maybe we're doing that. The descriptions of the mood that especially Eve gave in last year's conference was so good that I feel like this year it's going to be downhill. I hope we're not doomed. We'll do our best. The business of building a science is slow, plodding work. Max Weber, one of my heroes, German sociologist, said that his best ideas didn't come from actually doing hard work, even though hard work is essential to science. They came to him while he was lying on the couch smoking his pipe. And I had a bit of an experience like that last summer at a dinner that Qingli and Yonghong invited my wife Anne and me to a week or so after the conference. And it was a very relaxing kind of occasion. We weren't trying to do anything in particular, just kind of having fun and enjoying good food. And somehow or another, I asked Qingli something about her experiences at the University of Northern Iowa, where she got run out of her job. And that was actually the first time she and I had ever chatted personally about her experiences there. My knowledge of Qingli's mobbing, like my knowledge of most mobbing cases, almost all mobbing cases that I have studied, I tend to rely mainly on written documentation because that has less emotion in it typically than conversations with people. It's more reliable. In Qingli's case, her case eventually came before an arbitrator who appeared to do a very good job of reviewing empirical evidence and analyzing it. And so my knowledge of her mobbing was based mainly on that arbitrator's report and some other documentation. But then when I asked Qingli, as we relaxed after dinner, something about her feelings about the process, she began to tell me about what she said was the worst experience of so what happened to her, so she took the job at University of Northern Iowa in 2014. And for the first 5 years that she was there, things went hunky-dory pretty much. There were no fewer than 15, it's a bureaucratized university like most of them. There were no fewer than 15 formal evaluations of her work in the course of those 5 years. And she got glowing reviews, awards even for her work. And then finally, after 5 years in the upper out policy at that university, as in most, the departmental committee had to make a recommendation on whether she should receive tenure or whether she should essentially have her job ended. And they recommended against it. And so what she did was what you can imagine a person would do. She took an unpaid leave of absence to strengthen her vita in order to, if she was unsatisfactory in some way, inadequate, then she'd make herself more adequate. And so her case came up the following year, and they turned her down again, recommended against tenure. And so about that time, this was in the January of 2021. So by then she'd been denied twice by the departmental committee. And she was visiting Yonghong, her husband, here in Niagara Falls, because he works at Niagara University. And she said that she and Yonghong and their son Chichi were riding together in a car. And she just checked on the phone, checked her email. And there she saw in an email that she was being formally accused of research misconduct at the University of Northern Iowa. And so then she described her feelings then. And it was like everything changed, she said, because until then she thought, you know, I should just maybe throw in the towel, quit my job at University of Northern Iowa, find a job somewhere else and be done with it. But once here was this formal accusation of research misconduct, well, you can't walk away from that because then that haunts you. That basically kills your career. And so she describes sort of the heaviness of that moment, that, hey, it's not that I'm inadequate in some way or another. It's that these folks are out to destroy me. Yeah. And as she talked about that, it caused flashbacks in my own mind to almost 20 years before, in December of 1993, at the University of Waterloo, in an altogether different situation, because I was a senior professor by 1993, unlike Chingley, a junior professor. I was a man, part of the majority group, rather than a woman, part of a minority group. And I was just getting ready to, had just finished end of term marking. And those of you who are professors know that at the end of a term, you got this horrible job of grading essays and exams. I just finished that at home, and I wanted to get these stacks of exams and essays off my desk. And so I went up to the university to put them in my office at the university and to submit my grades, even though the university was closed. I wanted the stuff in my office there rather than at home. And when I was there, I figured, well, I'll check my mailbox, see if there's anything in there. And I looked in, and there were 2 petitions in there, from one of them signed by 4 of my colleagues and one by 7 of my colleagues, accusing me of abuse and harassment and intimidation, a whole long litany of offenses. And as Chingley talked about her feeling there in January 2021, when she checked her email on her phone as they rode in the car here in Niagara Falls, it was the same feeling that I remembered when I saw those petitions from my colleagues, basically to get rid of me. That I had entered into a new phase of departmental politics, something unlike the normal kind of wrangling that goes on in the work of a department. And so in the weeks after our dinner at Chingley's and Yonghong's home, I was thinking about, how do I conceptualize what is that? And then I thought about other cases that I've studied. Was there some point in those other mobbing cases that was similar? And eventually, Emily Godby, don't be embarrassed, because after Rick felt steel remembered your paper, I remember your paper too, and I remembered it last summer about the bullfight. And there's a term in a analyses of a bullfight called moment of truth, Spanish, el momento de verdad. And that's the term that I decided to place on this experience, this stage of the mobbing that Chingley described in her case, that brought flashbacks to my mind about my own case. And let me just talk about that for a moment. The similarities between Chingley's experience and mine represented a serious escalation of colleagues' hostility, a higher threshold. The hostility came from a group, collective ill will. The formal accusation in Chingley's case was signed by just one person, namely the department chair, but it was on behalf essentially of the department, which was trying to get rid of her. In my case, the collective nature of the hostility was clear by all those signatures, one after another. I eventually, you can find them online. I put them online. I didn't want to try to conceal them, so they're still there. The sender's obvious intention to remove the target conclusively, with finality, from the circle of respectability. That this wasn't the kind of complaint that can be remedied. The remedy would be the exit of the recipient of the hostility. The rationale for removal, not just insufficiency, like not enough publications, but personal dirtiness, moral turpitude. Incidentally, in Chingley's case, the university, I suppose to the chagrin of the people, of the mobbers in her case, the university turned that accusation of research misconduct on Chingley's part over to a committee that did not include the mobbers. It was a committee of people from outside her academic unit. And some months after, it took them months to reach the decision, but some months after the accusation, they tossed it out completely and it said no further investigation of a baseless accusation would be called for. So that was good. However, the decision to get rid of Chingley from the university stood. Each message and official accusation directed to workplace authorities and intended to result in formal punishment, not just an insult screamed in the face or flung in an email, but serious business. Each was an indictment. And the French word there is a really good one, dénonciation, that now you're formally charged with something that means we should get rid of you if it's proven true. So that it's an aggressive act that cannot be shrugged off. And in Chingley's case, that's why she said, even though she was thinking before she got that accusation of research misconduct, I should just quit and go find a job somewhere else. Once that accusation was there, you couldn't just walk away. In sum, each message drove home the hard reality that a full-blown mobbing was underway. The intended end game of the social process underway was nothing less than social elimination. For naming this stage of the process, Emily Godbee's paper meant a whole lot to me. And one of the reasons, I think probably, I don't know how many of you have actually witnessed a bullfight, but let me tell you, I grew up on a small, poor farm in Missouri, and a very insular kind of place, but one of the extraordinary experiences of my childhood, when I was 11 years old, on a family road trip, my brother, older brother, had made a little money and he spent it all on a new car and taking my sister, his sister and my sister and our mother and me to Mexico City. And so at the age of 11, I went to see a bullfight. And look, I grew up on a farm. I know how cattle behave. I grew up watching cattle, pigs, and horses. But I'd never seen anything like a bullfight. Left a huge impression on me. And Ernest Hemingway's 1932 book, Death in the Afternoon, illuminated the bullfight for me. And then along comes Emily Godbee to apply the bullfight to what goes on in workplace mobbing. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, there's a ritual that is proceeded through. First come a couple of guys on horses that have great big blankets on them so that the horses aren't too easily wounded by the bull. They're called picadores, and they have long spears. And they come along and stab the bull right in the back of the neck. That makes the bull very angry, and it also weakens the bull. So that's the purpose of the picadores. And after the picadores have done their stuff, just like colleagues doing petty harassment in a workplace, along come two guys on foot, three guys usually, and they have short sticks with darts on the end that are called banderillos. And so the three banderilleros have to run right at the bull. And just before they get gored by the bull, they step to the side and plant these darts, which have colored ribbons on them, right at the back of the bull's neck. And the effect of that is to make the bull even angrier. Then along eventually, so there's the picadores. See them? They're stabbing the bull right there at the shoulder. Emily used who's generally regarded as the greatest Spanish painter of his time, Francisco Goya, in the early 19th century. He did a whole long series of etchings and paintings of the bullfight to represent Spanish culture. And these are Goya's drawings. Here's the banderilleros in a split bull ring. There's one over here on the left with his bull and the one on the right with his bull. Then comes the matador. Matador is the Spanish word for killer. And he's gonna do the bull in once and for all. But normally in a bullfight, he doesn't do it quickly. He teases the bull some more. And he has a sword. In Spanish, it's called the estoque simulado, the fake sword. It's made out of aluminum or wood. And he puts his cape around it, waves it around, the bull charges at him, he steps aside, makes great fun of the bull, but he doesn't kill him yet. But then he changes his sword, changes the estoque simulado for the estoque de verdad, the sword of truth. And so this is the sword that lets everybody know, now we're doing serious business. And this, by the way, is what distinguishes the Spanish bullfight from the Portuguese bullfight. In Portugal, you don't kill the bull. You don't have an estoque de verdad. You just tease the bull. Then you turn him out to pasture, and maybe next week you tease him again. But in Spain, the estoque de verdad, it comes along and it's used ideally to kill the bull with a single thrust. Here's a photograph of the momento de verdad, the moment of truth in a bullfight, where you can see the matador has the gleaming steel sword that he's going to kill the bull with. So that is basically what my paper is about. What I'm trying to do is to introduce a new concept, an additional concept into the scientific study of workplace mobbing. The foundation of the science of mobbing is a conceptual framework. You already know key concepts in that framework. The words for participants like mobber, chief eliminator, target, rescuer, bystander. Words for stages of the process like exclusion, shunning, petty harassment, elimination. Words for origins of the process like elemental difference, ethnocentrism, achievement. Brian Martin, in his greetings today, mentioned a number of related concepts like corruption, for instance. So what I'm wanting to do here in a very modest way, I don't pretend that this paper is profound, but I think it's maybe helpful, is to suggest that in many or most cases of mobbing, we need to look for a moment of truth. And that's the same moment in a workplace mob as you can see in a bullfight when the matador brings out the gleaming steel sword and it becomes clear what this game is about. So thank you very much for listening.
That was quite emotional, Ken. Thank you. Are there any questions from our colleagues at the moment? I do have one question from a little bit earlier from Maria in the question and answer area, but I'd rather first pull from our colleagues because this was such a strong, impactful presentation.
Absolutely.
Is it working now? There we go.
There you go.
My name is Giselle Yasmin. I'm from Ottawa, Canada, and thank you for that very powerful presentation. And one of my overarching questions, because I am new to this community and this field, is that in our legal system, at least in Canada and the US and, other parts of the world, a person is considered innocent until proven guilty, and there are principles of natural justice. Well, theoretically. So I would like to hear some discussion on, how does that get undone so easily?
Oh. I mean, one source that I'd really heartily recommend to you is the website of Brian Martin on suppression of ideas. And Brian has, to my mind, exposed the flaws in our typical Western system of jurisprudence very plainly. That the principles of natural justice, for instance, which are wonderful principles, somehow or another. Do you know, can I tell you, I don't know, Father Maher mentioned this morning that he was going to talk about Pope Leo, and that if you wanted to just disregard his remarks, you could do that. You can do the same with this story. It's from my childhood. Growing up on a farm in Missouri, my dad kept hunting dogs. He was very proud of those hunting dogs. He trained them well. We hunted raccoons and rabbits, squirrels. And Dad taught the dogs, if we were going somewhere, he would tell the dogs to jump into the back of his pickup truck. And the dogs were really good. They jumped in, he would say, "Jump in, boys." They jump into the truck, go around to another farm or wherever we were going to hunt or whatever. Dogs would stay right there in the back of the pickup truck. However, if we went through town, the local town, and Dad stopped to run an errand or something, he would tell the dogs while he would park there on Main Street, tell the dogs, "Stay in there, boys," right? And the dogs would just stay right there in the back of the truck. Unless there happened to be a female dog in heat, maybe in the next would come along, or a male dog that they got threatened by. And then all the training in the world just went out the window, and dogs would jump out of the truck and go get into a fight or try to mate with the female dog or whatever. Humans are like that. We excel in Western civilization at being rational minded, right? Grounding things in law until there comes along some son of a bitch, right? And then it all goes out the window. And I have seen that, just like Brian Martin has seen it, in case after case in the legal system. You said you're from Ottawa? Currently in Ottawa, it was on CBC News this morning. There's a trial going on of the two of the leaders of this truckers convoy from back during the pandemic. And they defied the federal government, right? And so federal government then pounces on them, wants to make an example of them. They finally succeeded in convicting them of mischief. And the Crown is currently seeking a 7-year sentence for one of them and an 8-year sentence for the other for mischief. And what did they do? Well, they called on truckers to honk their horns. I mean, can you imagine that? The seriousness of that offense, calling on truckers to honk their horns?
Mhm.
So I would say that's an example of these wonderful, good principles just being forgotten about.
I'm not sure if there are any other questions from the floor. We're a little bit over time at this point, but you mentioned the story with the puppies, with the dogs, and I want to bring forward Maria Ivanova's question that she posed as we're leaning into the break. What she offered was, "I've lived what many only read about. I faced sexual harassment, and when I rejected it and dared to speak up, the silence was deafening. But it didn't stop there. That rejection challenged power, and it unleashed something far more insidious, mobbing, disguised as professional process. The harasser wasn't held accountable. He was promoted. While I was isolated, discredited, and pushed to the margins, he was elevated by the very institution that should have protected me. Sexual harassment doesn't just end with an incident, it often fuels mobbing. Saying no makes you a threat. Raising your voice turns you into a target. I've endured the full palette, the whispers, the subtle sabotage, the reputational erasure, the slow institutional tightening meant to make you disappear. What I experienced wasn't an isolated incident. It was institutional harassment, enabled by silence, sanctioned by leadership, and inflicted through bureaucracy. This isn't just personal, it's systemic. Thank you for this event.
That's a really eloquent statement. Thanks for reading it.
Yes. Our colleagues brought forward such strong reflections from last year and framed a very strong presentation as we're moving into this year's perhaps sense of vulnerability and sharing of such personal stories and experiences within the bounds of a research, quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods type of environment. I want to especially thank y'all, Rick, Peter, Eve, Ken. Thank you so much for bringing forward this strong frame as we move into the 2025 conference period.